Hey, this year has had some pretty amazing games. Maybe I could finally make one of those Game of the Year videos with games actually from this year. I haven't played many of them yet though. How far are we into the year now? Oh, fuck. I think that should do. So 2023 definitely was one of the years of all time. Aside from being kind of a meh year for me personally, that got worse during the last few months, even generally I felt this year just kinda was. But at least the video games were good, right? Yeah, saying that 2023 was one of the best years for the industry might be true for the releases, but that comes with a huge asterisk, considering all the awful news concerning the people making these great games. But even so, it's true that the releases themselves were top of the line overall, so I want to take time to highlight some of my favorites, even if some of the work ethics in the industry are what they are. Most of these games were a labor of love to someone, and that, at least, should be celebrated. And hey, I actually managed to play a good handful of new releases this year, mostly near the end of it, but a win is a win! So without further ado, let me introduce you to my favorite games of 2023. So Danganronpa is a thing that definitely happened at some point. As society, we just have to accept that. Seriously speaking though, while I have somewhat fallen out of love with this series over the years, I do think what we got with the three main games was more than solid enough for what they wanted to do with the concept. Which is why I'm glad the series creator Kazutaka Kodaka decided not to milk the franchise with a now pretty huge cult following, with emphasis on the word cult, and decided to go for something new instead. While Master Detective Archive's Raincode inherits a lot of Danganronpa-isms, both for better and for worse, it has a good few of its own merits. Following an amnesiac detective, Yuma Cocohead, the story takes place in an isolated city called the Kanai Ward, ruled by the iron fist of capitalism. Full of unsolved mysteries left in the wake of its corporate rulers, Yuma, his newly acquired Death God partner Shinigami, and a bunch of colorful and quirky master detectives dive headfirst into the city's mysteries, which more often than not involve a person dying. Like its predecessor series, Raincode takes a more active approach to the usual visual novel gameplay, which is something I'm glad this game retains. Instead of just making love to the A button, the game has you explore around the various districts of Kanai Ward, investigating cases, talking to people, and even accepting side quests. You know, the visual novel staple. However, that's only one side of the game, as the investigations always lead up to the Mystery Labyrinth, a dimensional space where mysteries take physical form. These work very similarly to the class trials in Danganronpa, where your main objective is to try finding the truth by answering multiple choice questions, breaking through your opponent's arguments, and playing weird minigames. Except this time, everything is more actionized, both in terms of presentation and gameplay, and the reasoning deathmatches especially are really satisfying. And overall, I'd say Raincode kept me entertained. I have some problems in places, both gameplay and story-wise, but when the twists hit, they really hit. And I generally enjoy the approach this game took with its new spin on the Danganronpa gameplay structure. You can have this W, Spike Chunsoft. You did pretty well, all things considered. You know, amid all the shitty stuff related to game developers last year, Nintendo surprisingly had nothing but good headlines coming out about them. Well, for all I know, there might be some smaller shitty news related to Nintendo as well that fell through the cracks, but at the very least, their two big flagship titles for this year had a good precedent showing that, hey, maybe treating our employees well does actually make us money. But the question still remains, while The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom may be an ethical product trademark, does it live up to the lofty expectations left by its predecessor? Well, I could take this time to complain about the problems this game brings with its story and mechanics, and how it feels just a bit too similar to Breath of the Wild in places, but all in all, it's a fun game full of discovery that kept me fed for hours to come, and that's all that matters right now. First of all, while the world is largely the same as the last game, the events of the game have reshaped some of the landscape and added more places to discover, and there's also 2 new layers of the map to explore. The Sky Islands may be pretty bite-sized for the most part, but they still offer plenty of cool challenges using the game's new mechanics, even if a lot of it has to do with ore transportation, and the depths are quite literally full of discovery as you light up the map by making your way through this dark underground, scavenging all the goodies as you go. And of course, I'd be remiss not to mention this game's major mechanic, the Ultra Hand. Not only does it allow for tons of creativity with what kind of crazy contraptions you can come up with, but it also makes for some pretty unique puzzles never really seen in the series before, and they mostly hit through with them. And that's also on top of other cool things like the fusing system, the extremely handy ascend ability, and the small quality of life things added to the first game's formula. All that being said, does it really rise above the rest of the series? Well, not really, but it's still a Zelda game at its heart, and surprise, I really like Zelda games. I would definitely put it in the "this is a very good video game" tier. If there's one thing in fiction that's almost guaranteed to capture me, it's all things adorable and full of charm. And if there's one video game genre that can do the same, it's platformers. I mean, no shit, just look at my last video. Please. So when you have an indie 3D platformer starring an adorable baby dragon going on a journey to save his siblings, needless to say, I am your target audience. Cavern of Dreams is a bit like a good workout. It's fun, probably good for your health, and something you should do more than once in a year. The point I'm trying to make is that this game is very good for your soul, and you should try it sometime. As you might be able to guess, one of the game's biggest strengths is that it's just oozing with charm, from the fun NPCs, the whimsical world design, and the adorable energy of the whole journey. Like, not only does the main character Finn employ the tactic of being illegally adorable on a regular basis, but when exploring the levels, you sometimes come across different landmarks or objects that will inspire you to continue the journey. And if that's not precious, well, fuck. Gameplay-wise, the game is pretty heavily focused on traversal/exploration and puzzle solving to find the dragon eggs you're looking for. So obviously, it helps a lot that Finn is a lot of fun to control. You can use his tail to hop around like no tomorrow, and his roll ability gives you a burst of speed that remains even after you stop rolling. So it's kinda like Sonic, but magical. See the sparkles? What I also like is that while you get new abilities throughout the journey, you can collect everything in any given level at a time with your current abilities. And granted, I do think some of the tasks and puzzles get a bit too cryptic at times, but overall I really like this setup. The whole game just has a great vibe, and considering it was heavily inspired by the 5th console-gen platformers, that's not at all surprising. I'll take this as my honorary Banjo 3 now, thank you very much. Ever get those sudden reveals of games you never thought were possible? Well, I for one thought that, in terms of video games at least, the Love Live IP would forever be doomed to the gacha rhythm game curse. I mean, that's the only sensible way, right? You get all the cool songs and then spend your life savings trying to pull one specific alt of your favorite character. So a 2D action game based on the April Fool's joke made into a real spin-off by Inti Creates of all companies was definitely not on my radar. Now, my first reaction to seeing this game was something along the lines of a 2D pixel-style roguelike in my Love Live, but then it turned out it was more like a Metroidvania, and my enjoyment of this game turned up way more as a result. The premise is very simple. All the totally not members of Aqua have been trapped inside an undersea dungeon, and it's up to the fortune teller slash handywoman slash aspiring Metroidvania protagonist Yohane to save them from the depths. And there's your excuse to run all around these varied environments while constantly expanding your abilities. or just bash your head into a wall repeatedly. While the overall design isn't anything exceptional, it utilizes the abilities you get very nicely. Some are better than others, but it's fun tearing through the dungeon with the power of friendship. And I think each power represents the personalities of each character pretty well. And going around finding materials, upgrades for your powers, and new means of exploration is also quite satisfying. But overall, I think my favorite part of the game are the characters. I am a fan of the original property after all. You don't have to have any knowledge of Love Live to enjoy this game, especially if you just like Metroidvanias, but it can certainly elevate things for you. I'm not too familiar with the spin-off anime myself, but seeing all these characters given a fresh coat of paint while still having that familiarity to them was very cool and refreshing, and the interactions Yohane has with them just give me life in general. So to put things in a nice little bow, Blaze in the Deep Blue is a very pleasant little Metroidvania and goes to show that this IP has more video game potential than just gacha games. So maybe we could expand those character interactions in an RPG or something? You know? Anyone? One franchise that I've had my eye on for quite a while now is Fate. I was on a roll with visual novels for a while there a couple years ago too, but while the original Fate Stay Night was certainly on my radar, I just never got around to it. But thankfully, Type Moon decided to grace us with another decent entry point and got together with Koei Tecmo to make it an action RPG too, for all you out there allergic to reading. Now, I am aware that Fate Samurai Remnant isn't exactly the most perfect entry point either, and you can probably get more out of this game if you played some of the previous entries. But as it stands, I was able to immerse myself in the story just fine and had a blast while doing so. Set in the 1600s Edo, Japan, the game follows the Waxing Moon ritual, where 7 contestants fight each other to the death to obtain a wish granted by magic. You take control of Iori Miyamoto, who, with the help of his new magical historic figure servant at his side, is swept into the ritual to fulfill his own wish. The combat is set up similarly to a Musou game, where you cut down legions of enemies with your fancy sword techniques, but stronger enemies and especially bosses keep you on your toes to prevent most monotony. Of course, since you have OP magic people helping you almost at all times, sometimes you can just let loose and watch the funny cutscene attack destroy everyone in sight. Awesome. But what really makes this game is the cast of characters. On the outset, there's not much to the story aside from the slow escalation of the ritual, but learning about the masters, their motivations, and their desires for the Waxing Moon is what makes it more interesting, especially when it comes to the main duo, Iori and Saber. And having a colorful group of the servants helps too, as each of them have their own quirks to make them stand out, or even a mini arc of sorts in their side stories. So all in all, while I was hesitant to give this game a shot at first, my experience ended up being way better than I thought it would be. And if this game is anything to go by, I'm sure the rest of the Fate franchise will have plenty to offer for me. Maybe I'll finally give Stay Night a go sometime this year too. Oh!
Elephant.
And that's just a taste of the many wonderful things in this newest Mario game. See, the joke is that I've never been too much into 2D Mario in all honesty. I think the ones I've played were all fine, but aside from Super Mario World, none of them have really grabbed me, especially compared to most of the 3D entries. And though Super Mario Bros. Wonder isn't perfect at grabbing my poor attention span, I can say that this is probably the most fun I've ever had with a 2D Mario game. And that's gotta count for something. Mario, and by extension the rest of these bozos, all control like a dream. The control scheme from the new Mario Bros. Games has been tweaked a bit to make the overall feel tighter, and the addition of badges adds a new level of play not really seen in most 2D Marios. Be it for some extra help in reaching places, altering your playstyle to better suit the level coming up, or just a good old self-imposed challenge, the badges add a welcome level of customization to the game. The most standout part of this game, though, is easily in its design. The levels are full of all kinds of new creatures, each more terrifying than the last, offering tons of new challenges to overcome, and combined with the new power-ups as well as the wonder flowers constantly changing up the level design, each level gets that much more unique and interesting. The game also gives you some amount of freedom on what order to do each level in, and even lets you pick which world to go to first further into the game. At its core though, Mario Wonder is simply just really fun to play. Of course, the aforementioned things play a big part in why that's the case, but the game in general is just bursting with joy, creativity, and charm that it's hard not to enjoy playing this game. At least when you're not getting destroyed by insta-kill death traps or something. Over the years, I've learned that there's definitely more to good video games than just fun in the conventional sense. But in cases like this at least, maybe that fun is all you need. So Bethesda is a video game company that definitely exists? We're not talking about Starfield. Maybe this is very ungamer of me, but besides a small passing interest in Skyrim and Fallout, I've never really had a big drive to try any of their games out. But thankfully there's more to Bethesda than just their Western game developer games, and Tango Gameworks made sure to have everyone's eyes on them last year. Talk about taking the world by storm almost literally overnight. Shadow dropping be damned, when your game has as much style and flair coupled with just as solid and unique design as Hi-Fi Rush, people are bound to take notice. And while it didn't quite hit the same chord with me as it probably did with some others, this game is still pretty goddamn amazing. The game's story is a very tongue-in-cheek satirical narrative about a big corporation with a great public image that's actually cartoonishly evil, and it's your job to make sure those evil machinations don't become a reality. Yet despite the very lighthearted tone, which also makes the story really fun in its own right, the game doesn't shy away from making you care about these characters beyond just the lulz and lmayos, even if it never gets super emotional either. However, the star of the show is the gameplay, and Hi-Fi Rush delivers on its premise in spades. Thanks to the main character Chai's new heart monitor, all of your actions are tied to the rhythm of the music. By hitting the beat on each of your actions, be it jumping, dodging, or attacking, you earn more bonuses in battle and thus higher rankings, just like Mama Devil May Cry used to make them. But even if you're not one of those crazy rhythm game experts, the combat is still a ton of fun with its excellent flow and multitude of satisfying finishers, and the exploration aspect is also fairly fun, disregarding me having to mash the right trigger because Chai has molasses in his shoes or something. Hi-Fi Rush just exudes this charm similar to the games of the 6th console generation, and since I have a big fondness for that era of gaming, you can bet your biscuits, muffins, and cinnamon buns that I am all over that shit. Even if I kind of suck at it a lot. Oh hey, would you look at that? Insomniac just released a new game. Time to sell my soul to the AAA industry. If you remember from probably like 30 years ago at this point, I called Insomniac Spider-Man one of my favorite video games back when I first played it. So it should go without saying that I was very excited for the long-awaited release of the sequel last year, and while I'd say I still prefer the first game as an overall package, there's still a lot to love about Marvel's Spider-Man 2. First of all, you might think the reason it's called Spider-Man 2 is because it's a sequel to the 2018 game, but that's just how they want you to think. The real reason it's named that is because there's two of them. See, makes perfect sense. And having double the Spider-Man naturally means double the fun, especially with Peter's and Miles' unique abilities, both old and new to this game. The improvements made to the ability system and the gadgets also enhance the combat even more, making it overall the best it's ever been. The traversal is still one of the best parts of the game, and this game only adds to its strengths by adding a few small things to help you zip around even faster. And with the map being effectively double in size from the previous games, they sure come in handy. I do think the side activities are kind of one step forward, two steps back in places, but most of it is still pretty fun, and the returning ones have seen pretty good improvements. As for the story, I think it's pretty solid. It's a bit all over the place sometimes, especially towards the end, but I've always enjoyed the enemy within stories that the symbiote brings to Peter, and Miles' development throughout is pretty satisfying. And while we can argue about the smaller moments not working as well as they could, the big moments always hit, and they hit hard. Truthfully, I'm not as excited about this franchise as I was back during its inception, but that might just be because of my withering interest in superhero media in general. But Insomniac still clearly has plans for these arachnid warriors, and well, I said that part about selling my soul for a reason. Capcom makes me so depressed. Not because of anything shady they might have done recently, but because they aren't making the games I like, and that's not fair. Actually, they literally just re-released Ghost Trick, and the Apollo Justice trilogy came to modern consoles this year, so clearly this user is talking out of their ass. Okay, Ace Attorney ports. Whoop-de-frickin-do. But I need something new to satisfy my cravings. And like many things gaming nowadays, the answer to my prayers was an indie game. One that I had heard whispers about before. And it was everything I could have hoped for. For those who don't know, which I'm assuming it's many of you, Tyrion Cuthbert, Attorney of the Arcane is an indie visual novel / point-and-click adventure game in the style of Ace Attorney, but it puts you in the shoes of a lawyer in a world of magic and other scary medieval-esque things like nobility. And this setting adds a new angle to each case, with what kind of magic was used, how it was used in the crime, and of course, who could have used the spells in question. Aside from the copy-pasted gameplay elements from Ace Attorney, the game has its own special ability mechanic as well in the form of Tyrion's Eye of Horus, letting him read the emotions and thoughts of other people. And with this ability, Tyrion is able to get information out of witnesses by reacting accordingly to what they're saying, thinking, or feeling. He can even imprint thoughts about the evidence in the witness's mind and glean new info that way, though this power is only limited to the epic case climax trademark. However, it should come as no surprise that the strengths of this game come from its narrative. Not only are the individual case mysteries really cool even aside from the addition of magic, but the core cast of characters is really entertaining and well written, either because of good character development, interesting backstory, simply being fun to be around, or all of the above like in the case of Tyrion and Celeste. I would give my life for them. It pains me to leave this game at number 2 because it's such a massive love letter for its inspiration, and I keep thinking about the characters all the time. But in my heart, I know it's very flawed in places, and I can't in good conscience call it my top favorite here. But apparently there's already a sequel in the works, and thinking about how good that could be makes me a very happy little man. So since this time was a little different from usual, I'd like to take this time with honorable mentions to look at some other great games I played in 2023 but weren't released this year. Not much to say other than that, so here we go! Psychonauts 2. So this game would have most likely been somewhere very near the top if I had included games from outside of 2023. In a lot of ways, it's a giant improvement over the first game with smoother control, better combat, even more creative mental worlds, and even a pretty good story. I do slightly prefer the first game, but it's still easily among some of my favorite platformers, right alongside Psychonauts 1. The Legend of Heroes, Trails mechanics from zero. After 8 years of being stuck in the liberal jail, I finally got to move on with my Trails journey, and oh boy. While I really liked all 3 of the Sky games, the smaller scope and more focused cast of Zero immediately grabbed me, and I found myself insanely invested in the underdog story of the special support section. In some gameplay aspects, it's a slight downgrade from before, but I still had a blast with the new mechanics, and even at its worst, I never wanted to put the game down. Metroid Dread. Now that I've been indoctrinated into the Metroid fandom, playing Dread was a pretty high priority for me, and man, everything about the game feel in Samus Returns has been improved. The new mechanics are a lot of fun. I love the environments on ZDR, and even the few story bits are pretty cool, if slightly disappointing compared to what came before. I'm not sure if it's my favorite Metroid game now, but it's most definitely up there. Resident Evil 4. So my hungry ass decided to play the original Resi 4 instead of the new and shiny remake, and yeah, the game does have a lot of things I'm not really that fond of in horror games in general, but I still had lots of fun despite that. The game is really tightly designed, looting stuff from zombies is fun as hell, and the story is campy in the best way possible. Klonoa 2, Lunateus Vale, Spark the Electric Jester 3, and Rocket Robot on the Wheels are also honorable mentions, but they were also that in my previous countdown, so I don't really want to repeat myself. This is your cue to go watch it. What the fuck am I doing on the floor?
Didn't I tell you to cut back on this shit?
I don't know what you're talking about. Ow!
You fucking Yakuza junkie asshole. I hate you so much.
Yeah, we had a pretty good run for a couple of years there, but the Like a Dragon series has returned to reclaim its throne at the top. And it's a shorter side game too. What am I, a Kingdom Hearts fan? But if it had to be one, Like a Dragon Gaiden, the man who erased his name, deserves it for sure. So the story is... I'm going to put this as vaguely as I can, but due to the events of one of the previous games, the series' long-standing protagonist Kazuma Kiryu is working for a dubious black suit organization, and that's already a big enough spoiler, so I think I'll stop there. Just know that some sketchy men show up, Kiryu's loved ones may or may not be in danger, and the overall narrative gives a great outlook on Kiryu as a character at this point in his life, and recontextualizes some of his previous actions pretty brilliantly. On the gameplay front, Gaiden is the culmination of every RGG action game in the Dragon engine, taking elements from both of Kiryu's forays as well as the 2 Judgment games. The game feel is similar to Yagami in Lost Judgment, but heavier and more impactful, which perfectly fits Kiryu's rougher fighting style. And speaking of style, the game's 2 fighting styles, Yakuza and Agent, are both really fun to use in their own ways, with Yakuza being great for some satisfying and powerful fisticuffs, and Agent for its dozens of cool moves and gadgets you can use. Gaiden also goes pretty damn hard on its side content. We got several returning minigames, some of which have been sorely missing for a while, and the Akame Network, a side gig that includes drinking with this wonderful lady, being a good Samaritan, and doing sub-stories filled with familiar faces like, oh my god, Monkey! The game also has probably the most interesting coliseum in the series by virtue of it allowing you to play as dozens, and I mean dozens of fighters, who mostly have neutered movesets, and there's rarely any reason to use them over Kiryu, but I digress. So despite my repeat crimes of picking this series' games as my game of the year, I hope it's clear that Like a Dragon Gaiden doesn't take that title lightly. It's a game that was fun as hell to play, and an experience that moved me to my very core. I'm FinnishDuck, and tune in next year when I'll be talking about Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth on this exact same spot. Maybe. Rockruff, put away the gun. I wanna be a hero. Pokemon! Thanks for watching, everyone. Hope you enjoyed the countdown. I tried some new things this time, and I'm not sure if they're here to stay necessarily, but since this was a bit of a special occasion, I wanted to experiment a little. I've got a few videos coming in the pipeline pretty soon after this one, with one which has its script almost finished, so look forward to that hopefully sometime soon. And now I'm gonna shut up so you can see the end cards. Bye!